Yeah. שיר למעלות אשא עיניי אל ההרים, מאין יבוא עזרי, עזרי מעם אדוני עושה שמיים וארץ, אל יתן למות רגליך, אל ינום שומרך, הנה לא ינום ולא יישן שומר ישראל, אדוני שומרך, אדוני צלך על יד ימינך, יומם השמש לא יככה וירח בלילה, אדוני ישמורך מכל רע, ישמור את נפשך, אדוני ישמור צאתך ובואך מעתה ועד עולם, מעתה ועד עולם. שיר למעלות אשא עיניי אל ההרים, מאין יבוא עזרי, עזרי מעם אדוני עושה שמיים וארץ, אל יתן למות רגליך, ושומרך, הנה לא ינום ולא יישן שומר ישראל, אדוני שומרך, אדוני צלך על יד ימינך, יומם השמש לא יככה וירח בלילה, אדוני ישמורך מכל רע, ישמור את נפשך, אדוני ישמור צאתך ובואך מעתה ועד עולם, מעתה ועד עולם. A comment about this psalm before we do our meditation. It can be a segue into our meditation. Let me see though if there's any way. Yeah, so we have to admit them. I was imagining that possibly there are more people. Yeah, people are figuring out, why do I have to pay for the gasoline to come to temple if we have a Zoom? You know, hybrid is hybrid after all. So especially when it's so cold outside, it's a scary world out there. So something about this psalm. This is one of the psalms that is being used a lot in liturgy, and not only in, I said that before, not only in Jewish one. It's one of the Song of the Ascents. There's a series in Psalms that are a Song of the Ascents. There's quite a few of them, and they're thought to be the psalms that the Levites prayed at the stairway at the temple, because Ma'alot, one way to think about it, Ma'alot is like a stairway is Ma'alot. So one of the thought was that the Levites stood at that like a choir. So they stood there and they would sing Shir LaMa'alot. There's quite a few of them, and one of this one particularly has been used because of the idea of God is my protector, right? And God will keep you from this, from that, right? So it's one of the psalms that are used for um, for protection. People would write it not as much as Shema Israel, but it's being used. And something that people have noticed is that what is the number of the times that the name of God appears in this psalm? Anyone can count? One, two. How many? Five. So people have said the reason why this is five is because it's for the five senses. So it's like what are the five senses? We know that there may be more of them, but traditionally, seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, and sensation. So basically, they said there's a teaching that this is it's actually to protect you in all with all your communication with the world that happen through the senses. And we can maybe use that as a segue into our meditation today, right? So let us again make ourselves conscious of the way that we are sitting. Before that, I'm going to be as conscious as to light the candles here at the sanctuary, not the sanctuary, at the youth lounge. This is not the sanctuary. This is the youth lounge. Here we go. Right. And so um, let's make sure that we are sitting in a comfortable position and in a conscious way, which means again that we feel ourselves rooted to the ground, and that we also feel ourselves sitting as straight and as centered as we can in this very moment. And since we're talking about the senses, the five senses, let's just scan the day that has passed, this wonderful, beautiful Wednesday that we've all lived through. And if we go through the senses, let's go one by one and try to have a memory that stands out from today. For example, what was one thing that you saw today, me included, you, me, everyone, one thing that we saw today that was really the most exciting, interesting, and important thing that we saw today? Now that our eyes are closed and we're meditating, let's just remember that vision that we had today, that sight. Why has it left its mark? Let's just take a few breaths to just be with the memory, the impression of that sight that we saw. What was that amazing thing or special thing or particular, peculiar thing that we saw today that is worth remembering? What are the sensations that it felt? What are the thoughts that are associated with it? Moving now to our other sense, to hearing. What was one sound or piece of conversation or discussion or song or noise that you heard today that made its most impression on you? Was it pleasant? Was it maybe unpleasant? What kind of impression did it leave on you? What kind of sensations or thoughts are associated with it? Just take a few moments to breathe on that memory. And similarly, taste. What was something that you tasted today that was most noticeable? Do we even remember what we ate in one day? Some people do, some people don't. Was it at breakfast? Was it at lunch? Was it at dinner? Was it a snack? What's the most memorable encounter with flavor that you had today? What are the sensations and thoughts that are associated with it? And similarly, with smell, it is possible that it's related to what we've eaten. Often these two senses are connected, but not necessarily. What was the most impressionable and memorable smell that we have experienced today? Was it the food, the drink, a perfume perhaps? Something that we smelled when we stepped outside of our door today? This is a more subtle sense. We don't use it as much. Maybe we haven't noticed any scent at all today. And then finally, touching. What is something that we touched today, held in our hand, experienced through the sense of touching, that has made the most significant impression in our consciousness throughout the day? Is it something we held in our hand? Maybe it's a clothing that we use today. Maybe it's a tool, some kind of a memory that comes up when we think about what we have touched today. So with awareness for these five senses, and just be in the presence of everything that happened this Wednesday. and collect it and bring it to the here and now. What are we sensing in this very moment? Which of our senses are active now? Which are passive? And as this day now is over and the sun is set, how has this day left an impression on us? What have we learned? What was new? Who are we in this very moment? From this place as being as centered and aware and conscious of who we are in our body, in our heart, in our mind, in our souls, I invite us to say together the Shema very slowly. So each word is in one breath. Shema Israel Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. And now we can say together the blessing for our study of Torah. May this time that we study together, that we designate for this mitzvah, for this commandment of study of Torah, be beneficial to our own lives, to the life of our loved ones, to our neighbors, to people that we know, and even to people that we don't know, who could probably use a blessing. Let us say the blessing together. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kideshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. And then we can slowly open our eyes and join the rest of the group here or on Zoom, wherever we are. It's always interesting to notice how we are when we're done meditating or exercising, if anything has changed. And meditation instructions, they can be different every time. And actually, one doesn't even need instructions when one meditates. I often feel hesitant when I give guided meditation like this because I feel like every word that I give disturbs the experience of the person who's meditating. Yet, I say, well, we're in a group here. I might as well just kind of share how I do it. And as you see, I also don't do it the same way. It's just there's different ways to go about it. So this time we use the senses. Other times you can use another metaphor. In the end, it's just meant for one very simple thing, to get us more conscious and more aware of who we are in the very moment. And there's also 50,000 other ways to go about it. So I just use different variations. But if you do it at home, if you want to say the Shema this way at home, when you wake up, when you go to sleep, you can do it either the way that I do it or the ways that I do it, or make up your own focusing methods, right? That doesn't mean that this is how it has to be done. Before I start with the, I really want us to continue with reading our Zohar text, because we're kind of digging into it. We had a lot of introductions, and we're kind of going deeper and deeper into that not very long part of the Zohar that we're reading. Before I go into reading the text, I'll stop the sharing so we can see everyone on Zoom as well. And I'll go back to the screen where we can see you and you can see us. Hopefully I'll be able to find it. Here it is. Do we have any comments or questions right now, either about the meditation that we did or anything from last week that you were worried about or thought about after last week's class? People on Zoom, anyone? People in the room, anyone? No. Well, one I'll tell you one. I'll share with you one comment that I received an email, and the person told me, well, me and many of my friends have been feeling that the existing political situation in the United States is very similar to going from Beersheba to Haran, from a place of abundance to a place of lack. Do you think that this class and the thing we're learning here can be applicable to deal with such a feeling? And I said, it's a really interesting question. Thank you for sharing. I said, maybe we'll talk about it a little more in class. So I said, first of all, when we talk about politics, I'm very careful because, as you know, rabbis don't have political opinions. And I'm also mindful that, speaking of politics and election, one person's Haran can be another person's Beersheba. One person's Beersheba can be another person's Haran. So I don't necessarily assume that everybody thinks the same, votes the same. I don't. And I want everyone to feel comfortable here, regardless of their political affiliation. So I'm being careful. That's one thing. Another thing is that I have experiences in the country that I used to live in, that sensation of feeling a big political change and saying, oh, things are changing, and maybe me or many of my friends felt not exactly in the way that we were hoping for. And so these things happen. They happen, occasionally. And what do you do, right? So I would, so I can definitely relate to the feeling, right? And the other people who are maybe so happy right now, maybe after 4 years, they'll be feeling that, right? So the question is, the question is broader than just a particular person or a particular candidate. So I can, generally speaking about it, I can say that I believe that these kind of teachings are very applicable, because for a number of reasons. One is because I think that that's not the main thing, but it is an important thing, is that oftentimes we feel like our Judaism has become very about the politics. And these kind of teachings teach us that it's actually not about only the politics. Our Judaism is not just about current events in America and how we should address it as Jews. It's about spiritual teachings, right? It's not only about what we think about the war in Israel or different things like that. It's a living spiritual tradition that has a spiritual depth that, in fact, may or may not have to do anything with politics whatsoever. There is a realm in life that is free from politics, and that is our spiritual well-being. And it's and to give perspective, right? The sun still shines. Many of our lives, maybe some of our life has changed since the election, but a lot of it also hasn't, right? So, looking at that perspective, right? There's different elements in life in which the politics actually don't affect us. And that's good to know. Politics is important. The issues at hand are important. I'm not undermining them at all, but they never are the entire picture, right? Even in the darkest times of humanity. And I'm not sure that we are in the darkest time. I think there's a lot of darkness, but there's also a lot of light in our time. There's a lot of dangers, but there's also a lot of good things. And I'm mindful of that, right? There are things, there are realms, there are fields of human existence that are actually, whoever is a president, doesn't matter, right? And it's important to remember that. And I think that even more so, these kind of teachings about the Ayin, about the Ani that comes from nothingness, they are meant to kind of give us inner tools, right, to deal with things that are changing or that are scary or that are uncomfortable or that are, um, um, threatening our sense of wellness or well-being in all sorts of ways. Right? I'm assuming that the person who wrote me the email felt that the current political situation, when for him and many of his friends, is all of the above, right? These kind of meditations and teachings and practices, if we incorporate them into our life, from my own experience, in fact, they do give us some kind of resilience and some kind of inner perspective that helps us cope better with those, social storms. Because these practices of non-attachment, there's something that's happening, and maybe it's even happening to me, but it's not me, right? Sometimes a lot of the debate that we've been having in this country and in other places as well, right? There seems to be a 100% identification between the subject matter, whatever it is, okay, abortion, the war in Israel, taxes, pro-life, pro-choice, whatever it is, right? Like what happens is when the topic of discussions and the person who's having the discussion become one and the same, that's when we get like the polarization and the hate and the anger and the despair and the intensity and the violence that often rises. Whereas oftentimes, if we're able to kind of like keep our perspective, yes, this is an issue, we have an opinion, it matters, but we are not that issue and we are not that opinion, right? And there's more space to hear one another. There's more space to see many angles to the same story. There's more space for us not to be as affected, right? And everybody can ask themselves, what are the discussions or the things that we've been hearing on the news? How much of it, is, something that is so unraveling that we just, it's like as if our life is over. And how much of it are discussion that we can have when we can agree and disagree and maybe find a way to work it out. So I think that these kind of tools of self-consciousness and inner introspection and consciousness are actually very helpful when we're in more complex situations, right? It's actually when we become more identified with what we're experiencing, is that often we get ourselves feeling more lost and maybe we more conflictual, right? And I'm not saying to avoid conflict. I'm not saying not to have opinions. I'm not saying that there isn't right and wrong, but it's how we approach those things that often we can use these kind of teachings and tools, right? And so thank you, whoever it was. I'm not even going to reveal you who you were, for bringing up that question, because I think that, these kind of teachings, to me at least, are very helpful in these kind of things. And also with the kind of like perspective, there will always be Be'er Shevas and Harans. There will always be places of strength and abundance and places of lack and conflict and strife. It's part of life. No one ever promised us a rose garden, right? People here have lived, a long life already. We all know that, right? And it's not about, what is happening. It's the approach to what is happening that counts a lot. So I feel that those things are related. So the spirituality is not disconnected from other things. They're not disconnected from values, from ideals, from our approaches to social issues, etc. It helps us build this inner strength and perspective that can be helpful in dealing with all those situations. And I think also this is what makes us different, maybe because we are a religious spiritual institution, right? We are people of faith here. And our faith is very, very loose. We don't have a dogma. I was actually now reading throughout all the reform platforms, which is a whole other class that we can have some other time. since 1885, when a bunch of Reform people gathered in Pittsburgh to kind of like invent American Reform Judaism. And until this day, they've had a few revisions of what is Reform Judaism. It's actually, you read the whole 5 of them. It's like then 1937, 1976, and you see that every few decades things can change dramatically, right? We don't have a very set dogma. Reform Judaism is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And even what's written in those platforms, people don't really know. How many of you know it? Like, we are a Reformed Jew because 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Right? We have a very loose kind of like, but we wouldn't agree that this is a synagogue and this is a place of religion and spirituality. So obviously, the inner world and our faith and our inner being and what we can learn about these things and our approach to the world around us and issues around is very important to us. Right? For many years, traditionally, Reform Judaism was about tikkun olam and about social action, and it remains so. Yet the spiritual aspect is an added complementary, aspect that I think is very important to have both, and other things as well. Right. So thank you again, the anonymous secret person, for raising this question. I mean, if you'd like to, I'm not even sure. You here?
Somebody in the chat has a
Yeah.
comment.
Oh, the chat. Let's check the chat. Got it. What's in the chat?
Scroll down there in the chat.
Oh, okay.
I can't read it.
I'm concerned, says Debbie Rosenfeld. Hi, Debbie. She says, I'm concerned that there is a diminished concern in this country about our fellow neighbors. Being criticized for being woke concerns me. I worry about those marginalized people, such as trans people, and hope that they won't be okay. Not sure how to be grounded about this. So, again, I think that. So again, I don't want to get into this is not a. Oh, let's just make sure that you're all muted if you're.
Oh, hi, this is Debbie.
Yeah, Debbie, did you want to say?
I just wanted to say I'm not sure how to be grounded about that. That's the
Right.
piece of it that brought it back to the meditation. And I meant to type, I hope that they will be okay.
Yeah. Well, so do we. And by the way, there are you might on a different note, I know that our social action committee are now concerned, for example, about immigrants, and there's actually things that there are people in this congregation. We're not just studying Kabbalah, right? But the people we have, if you ever are on Zoom, please make sure that you're on mute, because otherwise it brings in a lot of. Right, so I just want to say that, and again, I want us to go back to the Zohar teaching, but I think one is that we are not just a spirituality class. We are a congregation with many different compartments, and each and every one of you may be involved or is invited to be involved in the Social Action Committee and their subcommittees, and there are people now who are thinking about how this congregation can help. For example, with immigrants who are hiding from ICE, right? So apparently they've been seen in the Rochester area as well. So this is not something that we're not. Okay, so it's not only Kabbalah that we're learning. That's the beauty of our congregation, that there's more than one wing to the apparatus, right? The other thing is that when one says, Debbie, there's something that I'm worried about. It can be enough. See, I've been through a war in Israel. Right? Other people have been through other terrible times in other places. I don't know if any of you have ever been in a place where Iranian missiles are falling on your head. It happened to me twice in the past year. Okay, very scary. Other people have experienced other terrible things. And then someone says this issue. You mentioned the trans phobia, right? How do I find center, right, when such things happen? I think that exactly, Debbie, is the challenge, and this is what makes these exercises valuable, is precisely because it's difficult. The place to, like, when I say we have to learn to say Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad, and then we're supposed to feel Echad in unity. Of course, what's going to come to mind is all those things which makes us not Echad. Whether it's something within us or somebody external to us that we hate, their guts, or some phenomena that we can't stand, right? That is spirituality taken seriously is very, very difficult, right? It's a challenge to be able to hold your inner center and kind of like non-attached yet compassionate and committed, right, stance towards things. It's, if everything is wonderful in life, who needs spirituality? It's precisely in those places when we feel very challenged by the external reality that we, I think, need to, this is when we're called to the test, right? And meditating about those things, doesn't mean that we just meditate and then do nothing about it. But I think that it can give us the right, again, perspective and clarity and focus and ability to see, what is important, what is actually noise. Out of all the things that the news are telling us, what should we really worry about? What is just, so these are the kind of tools that we're trying to apply. And I think I'll go back to the text now, but this is kind of like was my reaction to the comment of the person who asked me on the email. All right. So thank you, Debbie, also for writing that. I think a lot of us share these concerns, right? And part of our ability to function as individuals, as a community, is also our spiritual and inner strength and resilience. And from there we can kind of like maybe think how to act in the most beneficial way. Right. So, okay. So back to our text. Yeah, so I'll share the screen again for the benefit of those who want to see the text, which is, I guess, all of us. Right. So we've been reading, and so as always, I'll backtrace a little bit, and then we'll go to the next paragraph, because it's always good to kind of like remember what we've read and then go to the next one. So we already know that we are having a very enigmatic and mysterious text about how the ani, the I, the self, is formed from ein, from nothingness. And we already understand that this text, rather than only being understood intellectually, has to be understood in that premise of understanding that those people have been playing with the three letters of the word ani, the self, ani, realizing that it comes from ayin and it goes into ayin, and it basically, in every breath, the self is formed and is constructed and deconstructed. Is constructed and deconstructed. In fact, most of us have a very consistent story of who we are and who we were and who we're going to be, right? But actually, each and every one of us could leave this room right now, get in a car, leave their home, and never come back, right? Each and every one of, not that we necessarily want to do it, right? Each and every one of us, if we're still working, could resign and quit their job. Each and every one of us can do a lot of changes, which we seldom do, right? And by the way, even in the context of you mentioned trans people, right? So our identity usually is very clear in who we are and what we are and what roles and we serve, and right. But actually, most of us don't change as much as we could have, right? So because we have a kind of fixated idea of what is the ani is, what is the self, who we are, right? And also, I'm not, I wouldn't be such as a radical to say that we should change who we are every day, right? No, we have our stories, we have our realities. That's probably a good thing, but also knowing that it's more flexible and dynamic than most of us actually realize, right? So this notion that the ani comes from ayin and ayin comes from ani, and every moment, in fact, is a new creation, is kind of like where this meditation is coming from. And we've seen that they're talking about their way to meditate upon ayin, upon nothingness, to basically look into the nuances, how the self is being formed out of complete nothingness. And someone last week said, is this nothingness that you're talking about God? Or that the Kabbalists are talking about, is that God? And I said, yes, it is God, but actually it's all God. existence, ani is God, nothingness is God, all the things in between are God. In Kabbalah, everything is divine. The physical world is divine. The spiritual world is divine. The intellectual world, everything is a divine emanation. And it's looking at these different aspects is what makes us understand it, is that kind of like their goal. So we've learned that the Aleph and the Ayin represents the bright head, right? The thing that is most concealed of concealed. The thing that is not tangible in any sense, speaking of the senses. Or once we have a thought or a sense of comprehension, it's already not that, because it's just would be a blank page, a bright light. And we've learned that Yud is the beginning, is a point of beginning, of origin, where all thoughts and all they brought those 22 paths. So you can imagine a point, like a big bang of the consciousness, right? A place where thoughts and numbers and words and opinions, they're all coming from that little point. And where does that point exist? Where is that point of beginning of consciousness? Where and when does this Aleph and Yud and Nun exist? Where does it not exist? All points are that point. Every human being, and maybe not even just humans, have that point of origin. Every moment is that point of origin, right? It's basically where it all comes. Every idea that is, or emotion or thought is coming out of the blank page and being put in words. That's the metaphor of the scribe, is coming out of that Yud, the tiny letter that represents the point of origin. And then we learned about the Nun, which they use the fact that it's a long line, and also that it has the end appearance, which is just a line, and it has the middle or beginning of the word appearance, which is a bent Nun. So these three letters, right? So the Nun, basically to make it polarized in the duality of male and female. And we've come to understand that these three letters of the Ayin represents three realms. One of them is the total divine, right? There's only divine light. There's no dualism. That's why it's Aleph, the first letter. It's the number one. It's before the duality of Bet, of Bereshit, where the world was created. Right? So beyond the duality, that's the Aleph. Then we have the Yud, which is basically the origin of all thought, numbers and letters represented in that Yud. And then there's the Nun, that is basically the duality of male and female, that also represents, remember, those gleaming gems, the world, the material world in which we all live. And then you see, so in fact, it's like your name on the grain of rice. The Ayin, nothingness, is actually nothing, but in a funny kind of way, it's also everything. Because like they took all of human existence, our bodies, our sexuality, right? The yin and the yang of the world, the thought, mathematics, language, our relationship with God, everything, and kind of like concised it into one little word, which is Ayin, which is nothingness. So in a funny way, everything comes out of nothing all the time. And then I said last week, listen, we're also being initiated here into the tree of life, the Sefirot. Because in fact, these three letters, Aleph, Yud, Nun, are representative of the first highest Sefirot, the first three highest emanations or deepest emanations of the tree of life. The first one, Aleph, corresponds with Keter, crown, which is usually depicted at the top of the tree of life, but in other illustration, it's actually the central one, because you can think about the tree of life either as something that's coming from the top to the bottom, or as concentric centers. It's a circle that each emanation is around the deep, right? There are different diagrams about it, but the origin of the tree of life usually would be Keter, which represents this bright light, this complete divine, which has nothing that from our human existence on this earth. And then Chokhmah, wisdom, the next one, is usually one of its representations is that Yud. point why it's the second. So if we had a blank page and now we have a dot on it, it's already dualism. There's black and white. There's a paper, the page, and the ink. There is a difference. There is something has been created. There's that dot. Think about a moment before the Big Bang, a moment after. There's already a creator and a creator. There's already dualism. And everything that is created is now compressed in that point, but then it can expand in any way that you want to take it to. So there's already now the complete divine realm. There's a potential of all human wisdom. In other words, all the everything that is not material. And then once we have Binah, which with the two noons, we already have male and female. And we already have kind of like the physical body that will be eventually created from it. These are the first three emanations of the tree of life. They're considered to be, the three of them, very, very abstract, very untangible. And every soul that is born comes out of those three, having the seven lower rungs, because it's 10 in total, kind of come out of those upper abstract three. So the first class about the tree of life that is divided into the first upper three that are very abstract, of which we've been learning about, the Ayin, the nothingness, and out of that is born the Ani, the self, in which we will find the seven lower ones in our each individual existence, like the color of the rainbow, right? The color of the rainbow, seven. You can see them in your own eyes, but if you were to shuffle them, you'd get those dreidels that you take the colors of the rainbow and you shuffle them, and then what you see is just a bright light. So basically, that is the idea here. And so one thing that we're learning a text and we're learning metaphors, but there's actually like a whole Kabbalistic knowledge that is slowly being discovered as we read those texts. Yes.
One thing I still don't understand is, the Hershey and Quran.
Mm-hmm.
What that has to do with that rest of that paragraph.
So we're going to hopefully get to it. One thing is that the word Be'er Sheva is seven. It's abundance, but it's also seven. And Be'er, which means well, not like how are you, I'm well, but a well that you dig. A well is oftentimes in Kabbalah a symbol for actually those three emanations. And particularly to the third one, Binah, which is because it consists the other two. Because if you imagine yourself as a field, so things grow on that field, but in order for them to grow, you need to give it water from a well. I guess the metaphor works more in the Middle East or Spain, where it's not so watery around. You need a well, right? So the metaphor is that in the center of each and every one of us, there's a well from which the source of energy comes out of. If you go to that well, you see it, and if you will look down into the depth, what do you see? You see nothing. Right? Because you can't see the end of the well, yet water come out of that well. So the metaphor of the well, Be'er, in Hebrew, Be'er, is oftentimes described as that well. So basically, you could say that the circumference, that's like the outside of the well, would be the Nun, the Binah, the third one. Yeah, the depth of the well, going down there, or even the point of where the water comes out of the well, you can't see it. That would be the Yud. And where those waters are coming from, that would be the Aleph. You can never see that. But by the fact that the water is coming out, and by the fact that you can take it out with your bucket, so that is the energies that is being given to the field, which is what we can see. It's our soul, right? So that's one connection. And then lo and behold, it's Be'er Sheva. So the well that gives birth to the lower seven emanations, that's one connection. Okay, and more connections we're going to see now. Okay, you're actually going to see that there's more than one opinion and an interpretation to how that goes. All right, so let's read the next two paragraphs. Or any questions? Do you want to say something? All right. Yod, I'm continuing reading from where we've read last time. Will, so we've already learned that that first thing that comes out is the Yud is also described as will. We've learned that in the previous paragraph, right? And we said, what is the most essential will that we have? Is the will to live. Remember, we discussed that last week. But if we actually want to live, our soul wanted to come, according to this tradition, out of that bright light, that divinity. It wanted to distinguish itself away, right, from the divine, and make that distinction. This is God. I'm created of God. I'm not God, right? So the will to live is the most primary will, and then out of that you get a lot of other desires. I want to eat, I want to sleep, I want to feel loved, I want $1 million, I want everybody to think like me and agree with me, whatever. I want this kind of president, I want that kind of, I want a lot of things. I want a home, I want a relationship, I want kids, a lot of things. But it all narrows down to the will to live, right? So will, Yud, will, emanates paths, striking between letters, forming the firmament of Jacob. Here's Jacob. Hey, he was our hero, right? Between two spirits, infusing speech amid the limbs, ultimately cascading to that Nun who is bent. North and south bonded with her as one, afterward linking together as one. Bent Nun is called Be'er Sheva. Suffused, is that how you pronounce that word? Suffused from Jacob to water all the flock of the sheep. Here's that metaphor of the field that I was talking to you about. Of this, Jacob departed from Beersheba and went to Haran. So we have that paragraph, and then we have the next paragraph. I'll read it all, and then we can discuss it and see if we can start the discussion now. And then, so I just wanted to have the whole picture. Alternatively, from Be'er Sheva above, for he, that's Jacob, emerges from her. Afterward, he descends to water Haran, the lower well, flaring Haron, wrath of Yahweh, the sword of Yahweh, court of Yahweh. Of this, God, nations have come into your estate. So I know this, especially the end, is very weird. Well, actually, the whole thing is kind of weird. So let's kind of understand what are they try to see what are they talking about here. So rather than, I have a suggestion. Rather than me telling you what I think that I see here, I'm going to let you struggle with these two paragraphs a little bit. Tell me what you think. Often when you say there's such a confusing text and I can't understand it, I would say start with one thing that you think that you do understand, and then see how we can kind of like try to decipher it.
Okay, the bottom part's about sex again.
Well,
it is. Okay,
how do you see that? Oh, he
He
emerges.
emerges from her.
So is it about sex or it is about birth?
Could be.
Mm-hmm. All right. What else do you see?
So it sounds like Yahweh's upset
Yahweh is upset that
Jacob went to the lower well, flaring with wrath.
Well, Haran is depicted as the sword of Yahweh. Is the place where Haran is where God's presence in the world is actually, speaking of the person who asked the comment about the politics and all, right? Haran is a difficult place. Is a place of wrath, is a sword, is a court, right? So basically, Haran is the place where we experience the world as a very harsh and conflictual place to be, and we also recognize it somehow as God's providence, but not in the way that we usually like to think about God's providence as, oh, fluffy rainbows, but actually as something harsh. All right, so that's towards the end. So it's not necessarily that God is angry with Jacob. Maybe God is that Jacob has experienced the wrath, the sword, and the court and the judgment of Yahweh. As that is Haran. That is what Haran is.
Is
Mm.
repeated theme chord of opposites or distance being united by something that goes between them. Between letters from firmament between two spirits,
Yep.
North and south, bonded
With
her
her.
one, linking is one.
Mm-hmm. See, so Eric, you're a psychiatrist. So I think throughout your life, you've been listening to a lot of people in all sorts of states of mind, right? Trying to say, what are they like? What are they saying? Which medication? I'm just imagining to be you, Eric. I'm not you, but like, which medication should I give them? Right? Trying to make common sense from all those things that this person is saying.
Last week, I had no idea what his words meant, but I understood at least what he was talking about.
Right. So I'm actually try to talk to that so that the people on Zoom, when you make your comments in the room, I'm reminded we have to make sure that the people speaking with a microphone so the people on the Zoom can hear us. Right. So basically, so we're seeing here. I think that what Eric has been saying is helpful for us starting to decipher these two paragraphs, because we see that there is a separation. We see that there's tension between different things, and there's an attempt to unite them in some kind of a coherent system, right? Thinking about mathematically can help, right? We have kind of like many, what's the plural of axis? Axes, whatever, right? Many axes going north and south, two spirits, right? Between letters, there's a firmament, there's speech, and there's limbs. So obviously there's a creation of a body, of a human being, probably, right? And there's wanting to have some kind of a unifying factor that doesn't eliminate all the different tensions in the system, but kind of tries to make sense out of the whole thing.
So, can I say
Yes.
something?
Yes. Sure.
Oh.
Who is talking?
Nancy.
Yeah, go ahead, Nancy.
Well, I didn't really get too much past the emanates path, because
Mhm.
when I was thinking about that, then everything that followed, it seemed to me, it says a person can go in many directions. And so like, okay, what's going to help you choose your direction? What paths are you going to? Jacob went down to the water and whatnot, but I don't know. That's kind of where I stopped. That in itself is pretty deep.
Yeah. So how do we choose our paths? And one thing that I think will help the conversation, there's a lot of this paragraph is so heavily filled with Kabbalistic symbolism that I feel like I have no chance by revealing a little more to you from their world to kind of begin to understand. And don't worry, we're going to come back. Whatever you don't understand now, we're going to come back to it next week, and we're going to meditate on it for a while. Jacob to the Kabbalists is not just a person. Is not just Jacob the patriarch. Jacob to the Kabbalists is a symbol for an emanation. One of the 7 emanations that I was talking about before. Jacob, in fact, is the central one that all the other 6 are formed around. So Jacob symbolizes in Kabbalah the self, the conscious self of a person, of a human being. All right? Or if you wish, the Kabbalists would say it's actually the part of the divine, but that divine which is experienced by us as the self. Okay, so it would be, for example, if we had to say where is that Jacob situated, it's usually the torso or the middle of the torso, like this is where Jacob is. And Abraham and Isaac, his grandpa and his father, would be the symbolizes the right side of the body and the left side of the body. Okay, so when a Kabbalist reads Jacob's, forming the firmament of Jacob between two spirits, okay, they actually mean that. They mean that a human is formed, and that human has a Jacob, a sense of self in the middle of each and every one of us. Okay, so, and then that being has limbs, has a body, has speech. Remember the Yud and the Nun, has all these components. North and south would be actually, that means the same thing. So the north and the south would be the right and the left side. In fact, I'll tell you which one is which. Where does the sun go through? The sun shines through. So it goes through eastern. Right. So north and south actually might be the head and the feet, right? But actually, so the idea is that person has dimensions. Okay, and they're all bonded, like Eric noticed, as one. All right. Now, what is her? Who is her? According to this whole, who is her? It could be. It could. So who is her? What are the two options? Who would it be if Jacob is the person? And I'm sorry. I have to apologize to all the females in the room that most of these teachings have been learned and taught by people who thought from a male perspective. So when they thought about the self, they said Jacob. But then when we learn about the Shekhinah, we'll have to apologize to all the men in the room because they also thought about God as a female in many. In other words, it's speaking of trans people, the kind of like the playfulness of the genders here is something to notice. So who could be her in this story then? Therefore, what's that?
The Shekinah?
So, but what is a Shekhinah? Yes, but what is a Shekhinah here? If Jacob, but let me ask you this way: in the story of Jacob in the Bible, is escaping from his home and going to his new home that he hasn't yet, experienced. Which kind of her is he either going to or from? What are the options?
His mother to his wife.
His mother to his wife. Let's think right. So basically, either he is coming out of kind of like the protection of his mom or his mother, out of a tent of his mother, and kind of like, right, either like like we said, emerges from her, right? Either the Be'er Sheva is the source from which he came from, or it's where he's going to, right? In all of that symbolism, if Jacob is the self and he's coming is the self here, right here, and Jacob is coming out of where? In the Kabbalistic sense of the emanation. We said Jacob is the self, and where does the Ani, where does the self come from? We already know that. From nothingness, from that mysterious well, right? So in that case, would it be his mother or his wife that is her here? Mother. Why? Because she is giving life to the formation of the self. So she would be the well, another symbol for Binah, for that third emanation from above. For the well is also a womb. I think we've said that before. Because the self is being born from another realm, right? Figuratively speaking, and also actually speaking, right? Most of us came from a womb, from an actual womb. Some of us in the room also gave birth, right? I didn't. Experienced from close by, but I didn't give birth 4 times. But okay, so but then what about the other option? What if it's his wife to be? Then what would that? So the self, every moment, this is This is what we're learning. I know it's seem a bit weird, but it's like an introduction to the tree of life, like in 10 minutes. And then it's going to help us later on in this text when we come back to it, and in other Kabbalistic texts as well. The idea is that the self every moment emerges from nothingness and goes into what? I come from nothingness, and every moment, what do I see in front of me? What do I see in front of me?
Everything.
What are the field? Everything, the world around me, the reality around me. Each and every one of us now has experienced like a whole room or a Zoom, whatever, with people around us. It's Wednesday, it's 8:00 p.m. We're Temple Sinai, it's 2025. My name is so-and-so. A reality, which seems very real. And the self is the self is like Jacob, right? Leaving his mother, Rebecca, his Beersheba, his source, his well of seven, and going into the world, which can be experienced as, hey, do you know when Jacob actually, when he went, after he had the dream, and he came to Haran, what is the first thing that he saw there? Who did he meet? You remember the story? You remember, almost, vaguely remember. He
Rachel,
met a person. Rachel, who said it? Who said it in the Zoom? We can't
Lona,
see it. What's
Lona,
that?
Lona. Me, hello.
Right. I'm putting back the Zoom so we can see everyone. Somebody is just joining our class now as we're about to end. Right. So think about this. Jacob left. Now we understand he left Beersheba because that's the name of the town where he left from was Beersheba. Started to come together, right? He left Beersheba and he went to Haran. So he left the well of abundance. He left his mother and her safety. Right? Actually, he left Beersheba because there was Haran in Beersheba. There was upheaval in Beersheba. Right? It wasn't as Beersheba as we would, right? So he was called to leave and be born into this world in the metaphor, right? But the first thing that he went and he met Rachel, which is his wife to be. Never mind the complication. And actually then, and by the way, 7 years he had to, the number 7 appears there many times. Right, so never mind that he had 2 wives and 2 concubines, and his life became a mess. All right, but the simplicity of the story, the first encounter he has, is he meets Rachel. Where does he meet her at? The well. There's a whole thing, right? She comes, and the other shepherd doesn't let her drink, and he helps her, and he becomes like the Superman, right? And they fall in love, and in other words, it's a person between 2 wells. Jacob is a person between 2 wells.
Yeah.
Well, right? It's 3 holes in a row. So, Jacob is a person between 2 wells in his life story. Many of us, either, by the way, if we're a man or a woman, doesn't matter. We came from our parents. We left our parents. We went to live our life, and we found some kind of partner, maybe we will find if we haven't yet, or right, and kind of like it's any psychologist in the room or psychiatrist will tell you that a lot of our lives is also the echoing and the mirroring of the homes from which we came, and the worlds that the home that we have built or will build, and all this transgenerational stuff, and figure out, and also breaking free from it, whatever, all the versions that you can imagine, right? And yet, the Kabbalistic way of thinking about it is also in the here and now and every moment. Because again, they would claim that our self, every moment, is born out of the well of nothingness and meets the world, which is another well of abundance.
Is that what they mean by nations?
What's that?
Is that what they mean by nations in the last?
So now you're getting to the question of the nation in the last paragraph, which, looking at the time, we have about a minute. I don't think we have time. I have to share the screen again to the poor people on Zoom who have been very nice and patient. I'm very proud of you all. And thankful. You're asking about the last of this. God, nations have come into your estate. That verse is very intriguing, but it looks like it doesn't have nothing to do with the rest of the text. Who are those nations? And it's actually very profound, and I'm kind of thinking if in the last minute here I'll address it, but we can come back to it next week. I think that this last sentence could have been a later addition. As, by the way, the whole paragraph of alternatively, I'm not sure that the same person exactly wrote all these, because the Zohar literature is as such as each paragraph sometimes could be, someone had a shorter paragraph, this meditation of the Ayin, and then somebody added. So we have a text, a very ancient text, and we're trying to see how it all came together.
Yeah, but wrath and sword and courts and all that.
It comes to nations.
The nation.
Right? So the interesting things about God, the nations have come into your estate, is a very interesting and, by the way, radical teaching, because the literal meaning of this sword from another Psalms, Psalm 79, is, Oy vey, God. Oy vey, God, nations have come into your estate. What is your estate? The temple of Jerusalem. Jerusalem. The land of Israel. Nations have come into your estate and defiled it and ruined it and put us in exile and all that. However, the Kabbalists, as you know already, they already like to read everything in more than one way. What's another way that you can read this God, nations have come into your estate?
Like, yay, they're all there.
Yay, the nations who used to not be in your estate, God, they have come into your estate. You see, so they're Jews living in the diaspora under Spanish, Christian, Catholic rule. They're oppressed. They're writing these spiritual texts. They're taking a verse that talks about the nations in a negative way, Haran, and now we understand that if we think that we have Haran because we have, a questionable president, let's put it politely, because again, I don't know, maybe some people here are thrilled about seriously, I really don't know, and I don't assume, but I'm saying if people here are unhappy about, let's say, political instability, right? Try to be a Jew in, the 13th century in Spain, where we have no democracy and no rights and nothing, and all you are dependent on some crazy king called King Alfonso X, who borrows money from the Jews and then makes anti-Semitic plots so that he doesn't have to pay them back. And this is all true, historically. And you say, you know what? Let's take the verse that takes about, oy vey, the nations have come into our estate, and just let's see the positive side, which is the estate of God used to only be in Jerusalem and only be for the Jewish people. But look, the nations have come into the estate of the Lord. That God. So, and how does that relate to the thing about the two wells? That God, that divinity comes out of nothingness, goes through a person, and then is being shared by the entire world. So it's also about, and we're going to need more, and we need to really wrap it up, because we're like, maybe we'll agree that we'll talk for 2 more minutes, and then we'll just continue, God willing, next week. But the idea here is that you see Beersheba and Haran. This is when it gets through the looking glass. Now that we start to understand that there's a structure here, a structure that works in many levels, and this also, by the way, connects us to the political question of how all this relates to current events. Think about this very interesting diagram of the self being born out of nothingness and going into the world. And in Kabbalah, it's not one directional. It's like the number 8, the energy that flows. And so the self is kind of like a dialogue between the divine abstract, the white light, the brightness, and reality. And there's a stream, a flow that goes from the nothingness into the everythingness through the self. And there's another direction where it's the other way around. It goes from the world through the person back into the source, into God, into the divine.
That sounds like meditation.
It is like meditation. And it works on the level of a few levels. Level number 1, in every moment of existence, every breath, we can experience this. As breath goes in and out, as consciousness comes from somewhere in the universe, I don't know where from. It's a mystery. I've been on this planet for almost 50 years now. It's less than many of you, but it's not. I wasn't born yesterday either. I still don't know where consciousness comes from. Right? I know that it comes from that inner well. And it goes into the world, and it goes. See, so that is one level of then that's the level of the here and now, every moment. Level number 2, the course of a journey of a person's life. We are born of a family, parents. We go out into the world. We create our own world. We become the parents. Somebody else comes. It also works on the level of history and nations. Right? God has come and made himself, herself, whatever, itself, themselves, whatever, from Abraham and all that, and has been revealed according to the Jewish faith, but not only the Jewish faith, including according to the Christian and the Muslims, at least, through the Jewish people, right, to all those other nations, right? And then it's becoming like, and the Kabbalists are saying, oh, you know what? Wonderful. And we need to finish. People are looking at their watches here. Thank you for reminding me that, Susan Itkin. But all right, is that you see that the same kind of like diagram for the Kabbalists, this tree of life that we're going to have to learn more about. But now we're like getting like the 101 through this text, right? Is a kind of a way of thinking about the world that works on all those levels: the personal, and then broader circle, which is why it's interesting that they bring the nation at the end. In other words, it's not just got bigger. It's bigger and smaller, right? So we're going to come back to these paragraphs next week, God willing, because I feel like that we're only starting to kind of like understand what they're talking about. It's like a riddle. And the good news is that now we know a little bit. When you read it again, it's going to make a little more sense, possibly, to the degree that it does, because some of it is, again, it's like poetry. It's like a Zen riddle, right? But we're going to see that there's actually a system within the non-system, right? And then the good news is that when you get to the next Kabbalistic text, we're already going to have that one in the back of our mind so that our knowledge of Kabbalah can become deeper as we progress. All right? Okay. Whew. Take a breath. So people on Zoom, thank you so much.
Thank
God
you.
bless you. I hope we didn't confuse you too much.
Now
And we're going to take it next week from where we took it, from where we've been.
Thank you. See everybody next